It was kind of hard when I first started coaching to say, well, how can you just not get it? Are you serious? We've been talking about this for a week, a month, a year, and you're still doing the same thing. What you realize is people develop in different times. People will get it when they need to get it. And it's about being patient as a coach or a leader, and allowing people to get it when they are ready to get it.
Hello, I'm Andrew Horsfield, and this is The Messy Middle, a podcast designed for people like you who want practical strategies and skills that can improve how you work, lead, and live. It's time to listen to some practical wisdom that's going to help you progress your personal and professional life with this month's guest, Marc Sophoulis. Marc is a professional coach that plies his trade at the elite levels of both tennis and AFL football. Apart from being a coach, he's also spent the past decade mentoring and training other coaches in the art of athlete development and has deep personal and practical experience in developing and working in high-performance sports environments. So when I wanted to speak with someone about how we see and seize upon opportunities to advance, I immediately thought of Marc. This conversation extends well beyond the boundaries of sport, as Marc's practical insights and advice are equally relevant to leaders with teams, parents raising kids, as well as individuals who are just committed to being the me that they want to be. We cover a lot of ground in this episode, from why we should embrace learning and growth to how we establish positive learning environments, common obstacles that we must overcome when pursuing personal or professional growth, and the important role that rest, reflection and recovery play in our growth and development, plus a whole heap more. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Marc. His down-to-earth nature and accessible wisdom is going to help you improve the way you see and seize upon your opportunities to advance. Please enjoy this conversation with elite coach and educator, Marc Sophoulis. Welcome to The Messy Middle. This is a real treat. It's great to be talking with you and get the vast experience that you have for coaching and learning and performance and human performance. So it's really ripper to be talking with you.
Oh, no, thanks for having me, Andrew. It's an absolute pleasure. I enjoy it. I think I learn as much from these conversations as hopefully someone might learn from listening to it. So, when you talk about things, I've got a little philosophy around the person doing the talking is doing the learning. So, I'm going to learn as much from this conversation as hopefully people that are out there. So it'd be great.
Yeah, good one. And we were talking just before we started about part of that role of curiosity in learning, and maybe wasn't the place I was going to start, but it's a good place to start. What do you see curiosity as a key component to good learning and good performance?
Oh, I do, 100%. And it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or if you're a coach or if you're, leading a business anywhere. You kind of want to pull in different ideas from different areas of life. I'm a tennis coach full time, but I also work in footy. And I think that both of them work really well together. I take ideas from footy and bring them into tennis, which is quite unique. I take tennis ideas and bring them into footy from an individual perspective and work with one-on-ones. And then I might work with a footy club and then take, some stuff from that club and go, well, hang on, we could use that in our environment. So I think being flexible in your mindset and have a really growth mindset that you can learn from anywhere and anything. As a coach myself, I learn more from my athletes than my athletes probably learn from me. And I've always had that mantra is every single person that I deal with in a day-to-day basis is someone that can teach me something, whether it's a way of delivering, way of giving feedback or something that they do that I wasn't quite aware that some people go through from a psychological perspective in thinking. So, you've got to be curious to be able to learn. And I think that's something that, I think I pride myself on is wanting to be curious about everything and wanting to grow from every opportunity.
How did you develop that, Marc? So I reckon it's counterintuitive, because I'm thinking about the leaders out there or even the coaches, where you got players looking at you, or you got people in your team looking at you, and we often default thinking, okay, I've got to have the answers, I've got to set the direction, I've got to know everything. Yeah, if I'm a bit vulnerable, if I'm not clear here, then I'm not capable. So how did you develop that? Can you think of a time where you took a risk and it worked or didn't?
Yeah, I think probably the couple of scenarios in my head that come to mind is when I first finished my qualifications as a level 3 tennis coach, which is the highest in Australia, but I thought I knew everything, and I was like, "This is great." I'm the it and a bit coach. Watch me. I'm gonna fly from here. And I got this first job with a player, and this player was in the top 100 in the world. And I thought, that's okay. I've got all the answers for you. Don't worry. And I went out there, and I literally felt like I knew nothing. And I actually got to this job, and I pretty much stuffed it from day one, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. And this player was quite good and was literally just challenging everything I was saying. And I thought, this is not supposed to be right. This is not what the textbook told me. So I felt like at that moment was that moment of reality of saying, okay, the book tells you one thing, but you need experience and you need opportunity to gain experience. So what I did from that point was I took on everything and anything. I took a little bit of leaf out of Richard Branson's book, just say yes and work out how to do it later. And basically anyone that asked me to do something, I said yes. And I still do it to this day. And you messaged me only a few days ago to ask if I'd come on here. I'd say, yeah, I'll do it. I'll work out how to deal with that later. And if I don't have time, I'll work out how to make time. So, I think those are the things for me is, I want to put myself into situations that are going to make me get better. And I need to be out of my comfort zone. I need to be always making sure that I'm willing to learn as well as willing to teach. And if I can take every opportunity like that and say, look, I don't know the answer, but if you ask me a question, I don't know it, I guarantee you I'll find that answer and I'll make sure that we make it work for both of us. And that's my vulnerability as well. And I think that's an important part of being a good person at the head of a job or a business or a coaching leadership role.
And what was the outcome of that player where you say you stuffed it up? Because I think vulnerability is a superpower for leaders in the sense that we fear a lot of what doesn't happen. And when we lead with vulnerability, we get a whole lot of intangible benefits from that. How did it end? And did it end as a fairy tale happy ever after or not such a great ending?
It did, actually. And I ended up coaching this player for about 8 years and was this player's go-to coach. And I don't want to mention names, obviously don't like to sort of put people in that situation. But,
of course,
I worked with this player for 8 years and we had a great relationship and ended up coaching a family member of theirs as well. And, then it ended up being top 10 in the world in doubles. And, I think the relationship really grew. And I think because I was open and honest and I was authentic to say, hey, you know what? I thought I knew it all, but I actually don't. I'm going to work out how we can make this really work and make you the best player you can be, but I also need to improve myself. And I felt like that was a really important factor in opening myself up to say, hey, I'm willing to be vulnerable. I want you to be the same, but I need to do that first. So a lot of coaches want their players to be vulnerable. A lot of leaders want their staff to be vulnerable. But the problem is if you're not that person first, you don't open the door for them and allow them to walk through it. So that to me was a really important factor in this conversation with this athlete. And we had a great relationship, still do. Players now not playing at the highest level anymore, but, we have a great relationship. And I felt that my authenticity was probably what caused that to continue.
Yeah, brilliant. I want to sort of pick up where we're at, but change tact a little bit to talk about. I mean, coaching has a premise of improvement, right? In terms that we want to get better. It's hard work, though. Can you make the argument for people listening about why we should actually get better?
Yeah, look, I'm a pretty competitive guy, so I think for me it was quite an easy one. I'm probably my harshest critic, and I think a lot of the best players I've ever worked with and a lot of the best coaches I've ever seen are actually the harshest critics. And they find ways to always make sure they're better. And, I don't need someone to tell me what my weaknesses are because I actually know what they are and I want to work on them every day. And if you can't accept what you are not good at, you find yourself really just running on a treadmill. So for me, it's about identifying those areas in myself. And I like to do that on quite a regular basis and have a lot of self-reflection, which as a leader, you're always helping others, but never really take the time to look into your own life. And I feel like in my life, I try to reflect upon things every day to continually grow and evolve. For me, it's been an easy part, I guess, to continually have that growth mindset. But I can understand from leaders out there, it is quite challenging, because you're putting out spot fires every day. You're always trying to solve problems. And where's the time to be able to continually grow for you? And I always look at those, situations as an opportunity to grow, but also you need to sometimes stop, reflect, and look outside yourself and get some feedback. I have mentors outside of sport that I talk to on a weekly basis. I have mentors or people that give me honest feedback, including my wife, on a regular basis. That's quite a nice way to deal with it. And I've got a couple of young kids, and you always hear their language as well around how you are as a person. So I think that for me is an important part of reflection as well, is how are the people around me feeling when I'm speaking or when I'm there, and my presence, and what is that like? So I like to always make sure that I'm better than the day before, as I said.
Yeah, so let me just get really clear on that, because I think reflection's one of those things that's really important. So can you share, when you say, you reflect and look of trying to get better each day, is there a practice you have that's consistent with that? Is it on the fly and just that's the type of mindset you have of just looking and assessing, or is it a bit more structured and rigid for you?
Yeah, no, it's a little bit more flexible. So I use my driving time as my self-reflection time. So I don't like to have anything in my mind. I like to have a clear mind in the car, to be quite honest. And that's my time when I drive to my job. I try and set myself up for success for the day. Is, okay, what does today look like for me, and what does it look like for the players that I might have in front of me? So, in tennis coaching, you might have a different player every hour, for example, or a different group of players. And, you think about those sorts of things on the way. Okay, what does today look like? Who do I want to be today? What's the way that I need to approach today? And then you go and do it. And then on the way home, it's a reflection piece of, okay, did today go how I needed it to go, and how the athletes needed it to go for them? Did we get out what we needed to get out? If it didn't, then in my self-reflection piece is how I start the next session with those kids next time. So it's okay, well, I reflected upon it. A session ran like this yesterday. I think today, we need to have this focus because I felt like yesterday we didn't quite hit the mark with that. Or I didn't quite hit the mark with that, and maybe I wasn't clear enough, but here's what we're going to look at. And I try to do that every time that I either go to the courts or leave the courts. And then also with players in particular. So if I sit down and have a session with a player, I like to always start with, where did we leave off from last time? And then always finish off with, okay, what's the plan moving forward?
So tell me about how you use mentors and those other allies that you mentioned, including our partners. They're often, the good tellers of truths, and kids are great barometers of our leadership style often.
Absolutely.
How do you use those? Again, is it a formal relationship you have with people? Is it a regular catch up, or just a call when you need it? How does that work for you?
Firstly, when I think about mentors, every coach needs a coach. So, I think that's a really important way to start this is every coach needs a coach. Every leader needs a coach or a person to have them, have in their corner. We always need someone in our corner to discuss things with. And I've always had someone in my corner. I've always had 2 or 3 people in my corner. So I have someone in tennis, someone in AFL. I have someone outside of both. I have my wife as one of those people as well. And you kind of get really honest feedback. And if there's consistencies with the feedback coming through from all angles, obviously there's something that is consistent across the board that I need to work on as well. So generally it's a conversation when I need it. I might give someone a call or whatever it might be. But the great mentors are the ones that reach out to you and they feel what you're going through before you even reach out to them. And I've had a few of those guys that just know when I kind of need a phone call. And that to me is important, that your mentor or your coach is someone that really understands you and understands who you are as a person, who you are as a coach, and what you actually need and when you need it. So, I've recently, the last few years, gone into a lot of mentoring myself, and I find myself reaching out to others because I felt like when someone reached out to me before I had to reach out to them, then they knew that I really cared. And that's really important. So, so I have mentors that I catch up with every couple of weeks generally, but then I'll also call them ad hoc as well, and they'll call me ad hoc. So we kind of keep it quite flexible. I just want to call them and say, hey, I want to have a chat about, some things I've been doing on court, and then just get a different perspective of it. And I think that's important, is perspective. So, mentors for me are critical because it just keeps me on track, and I enjoy having someone in my corner all the time.
There's a couple of things I want to pick up on, if I can, from what you said, because I think there's 3 nuggets, and if people haven't quite picked them up, I absolutely want to make sure that they do. So the first one is your wife, because I think so often we go to people above us or in our field, and it can create that echo chamber of just what they think or what their philosophy is within our realm of expertise. And I think to have someone who knows us but doesn't necessarily know our trade or our craft is a really good sounding board.
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as you probably don't want to hear it at times, you kind of you listen and you take it on. And I'm hoping she never listens to this podcast at all. But for me, you hear it and you go, wow, am I really overreacting to something that is not as big, or have I underreacted to something that she thinks is more of a bigger deal? So I kind of always like to hear it, because it kind of gives me a perspective of someone totally outside what we do. And like you said, it's critical.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, I've got a problem, so let's pick up the phone. And that was one of the things I was going to ask you as a coach, is how do you pace development, in the sense of when do you slow it down, or when do you sometimes speed it up to go, hang on, this is working. I can make some really good ground here with this person or team or group.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually something I'm grappling with a lot of assistant coaches that I have as well, is, getting them to realize when is that moment that I can really speed things up and go, hey, we've got this, let's go to another level and layer it to another level. But then when's the moment, and I had this conversation this morning, actually, so it's great that you brought this up, but, where are they currently sitting, and how do I get them to where I want them to be or where they need to be? And you kind of have these gaps all the time. And my reflection upon that is, I actually didn't understand this. Well, I'm trying to understand it better and better as I go along, and I'm not a finished product at all. But as I got more experience, I started to get more of a gut feel. And, there's no book that's going to tell you when to speed it up or when to slow it down. And there's no right or wrong. It's kind of like, okay, well, are they ready for it? And sometimes you might need to speed it up to see if they're capable. But you might realize that there might be one rung below that where they're currently sitting. Go, okay, well, we can only go up one step rather than the two that I thought we could. Let's just go one step up and then go to the second one. So it's a bit of you sort of need to play around with it. But, it's even, you've got a player, for example, in tennis, it might be a junior athlete that wants to transition to a pro level of tennis. And it's a massive jump. So you've got little tournaments that are in between that. And you go, well, let's start off with, maybe you might go to one rung above where they are and try that tournament, and they're capable. Or do you go, no, let's go 2 or 3 and see where they currently sit, because I don't want to squash their growth. So you go a little bit further, you stretch them and kind of see where they sit in between that, and then fall back to the level that you think they should be. So I'm really big on experimenting as well. Like, you're never going to find that answer with one guess.
Yeah. And I reckon one of the things that I would want to encourage people listening from what you've just said is that, we often want the success of successful people, but we don't want that failure bit. So we want that sort of, I want to, like you're posting some great videos, we'll include some links to on the show notes. So, and you mentioned before that you get the criticism of that, but people often see the 50 likes or, whatever, and we want the likes, but we don't want the criticism, and it hurts us. So, I love the way that you're sort of managing that, in the sense of going for the stretch and seeing that as just part of growth, and then finding the level after that.
YouTube, how to train a flea. And if you you're probably listening to this in your car and maybe you're driving off the road right now, so keep your eyes on it. But if you YouTube how to train a flea, what you'll find is that to train a flea, you put them in a jar, put fleas in a jar, and fleas are a jumping insect. So they'll jump and jump and jump. What you do is you put a lid on it for 3 days, and the fleas will continue to jump. But what they do is they hit the height of the lid for 3 days. When you take the lid off, they actually jump to the height of the lid, right? And they just keep jumping to that height, because that's what you've trained them to do. So basically with being a leader and a coach, my job is to take the lid off, not allow something to squash the growth of anyone, and try to stretch the growth as much as possible. And if we find that we don't really reach that sort of level, that's okay. Failure is a great learning tool. And I know everyone always says, losing is learning. It's not, losing is not learning. Everything is learning. If you lose a match or fail at something, or, don't have the success that you would want to achieve, but what did you actually get out of what happened just then? What are the learnings you took from it? I always say winning is more learning than losing, because winning creates a success formula that you can use and do to replicate success again and again and again. So if something works for you, find what that formula is to continue to replicate. So training fleas is about taking that lid off and making sure that we go, let's stretch this person. Whatever is in front of me, let's stretch them and see where they land. Now, they might not achieve what you want them to achieve or what they expect to achieve, but that's also okay because it gives us a teaching point to get them to that level at a faster rate as well.
Yeah, good one. I really love that. And what role does self-awareness have in the success of that, finding that level for the athlete in terms of, one, them picking up those learnings, so they self-regulate that, not just be relying on the coach all the time because they're often on court or in the field of play and they can't be looking at you all the time.
Yeah.
And if it's not too big a question as well, is how much is that self-motivation and drive important for that in an athlete to work with you in where that level is?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And tennis is a sport that I always tell people is probably the hardest to coach, and it actually exposes your coaching extremely in tough situations because we can't coach players when they're playing. So our job is to set them up for success in the weeks prior, months prior, years prior, and then they go on court and they have to be able to play on their own. So when I have a young player come to me, my biggest job is to actually educate the families more than the kids. Because, as a parent myself, we become hovercrafts. It's like we protect our kids, we put them in cotton wool. We don't want them to get hurt. We don't want them to fail and cry and be upset and disappointed. But that's actually the biggest part of growth and building resilience. So, I always say to parents, let your kid go, let him cry, let him hurt, let him find that stuff. Obviously, we want to help them around it, but you set up these sort of parameters to say, well, let's allow them to problem solve, make decisions, fail at times, and we'll try and help them succeed by those learnings of what they've gone through. Because the challenge that I have as a coach is the parent is talking to them the whole way in the car about what they want them to do on the court. They go on the court and the parents like at them. I'm coaching them, and sometimes it might be me teaching and trying to give them answers at times. They're at school, the teachers are doing the same thing. Their friends are telling them what to do, and no one's ever asking, right? No one's ever helping them to make decisions and problem solve. So it's about creating an awareness around these athletes. You use that word self-awareness, but to know what to do, when to do it. So, my coaching is about taking them to Bunnings, filling their toolkit with tools and saying, here's the situations that you would use those tools in, and then allow them to find those situations. And when they come up, go, oh, great, that's when I use that tool. That's when I use that one. So then they can make those decisions on their own under pressure.
Do you find moments as a coach where you've got a player that just you do want to grab by the scruff of the neck and tell, because it's sort of like, man, we've been getting through this and you're just not, and the bit you're missing I can see and it's right there and I just need to tell you how to get that done. And how do you deal with that as a coach yourself in terms of, turning that volume down a little bit sometimes?
Yeah, I didn't deal with it well early, let me tell you that much, Andrew. It was a challenge. I'm pretty feisty and competitive, and it was kind of hard when I first started coaching to say, well, how can you just not get it? Like, are you serious? We've been talking about this for a week, a month, a year, and you're still doing the same thing. But, what you realize is people develop in different times, right? So, people will get it when they need to get it, and it's about being patient as a coach or a leader. And allowing people to get it when they are ready to get it. As much as we would love them to be us and be able to do what we do, you sometimes go say, well, hang on a second, they do it in a different way and they do it at a different time and they're doing the best that they can. And if someone's giving effort, that to me is more important than if someone's executing their role. The effort and it's very hard these days to find, for a coach, it's hard to find a player that will give you maximum effort 100% of the time. It is very difficult to find that. And when you do, if they can't execute it, you know what? They will, because they're going to put the time and effort in to do it. So it'll come, but it'll come when they need it to come and when they're ready for it to come. There is times where you have to be direct as a coach. There's no doubt. Like, as a leader or coach, I have to be direct at times because maybe my indirect way of coaching isn't getting through. So you change your tact, you change your tone, you change your questioning to direct, sentencing, and you go, okay, well, sorry, but we've tried this indirect way for a month now and it ain't working. So, and show evidence too. When I'm coaching, it's like, I can say this, but what's my evidence behind it to prove that what I'm actually saying is something that you need to hear? Data for me in tennis is critical, or footy. Hey, we're losing, let's say it's a football example, we're losing stoppage at the moment. Are we? Yes, we are. We're down 15 to 5 stoppages at the moment. Great. Now you've given me a number to say that, yeah, you are right. And it's not just an opinion you're telling us. So then all of a sudden the trust and buy-in goes, okay, so there is a problem there. And then here's the solution to it. So, so your communication needs to be, adaptable. And I never, ever coach the same way to every single athlete. Every player deserves an individual way of coaching. Understanding the person in front of you is so critical to how you use your language and your approach to coaching.
Yeah. What are the strategies you use to help people overcome that limiting belief or develop that growth mindset that you mentioned a couple of times already as being important to progress?
Players in particular will lack belief or confidence because they compare to others. And it'll be no different to someone in a workplace that is, in a job, but they're comparing their efficiency or their quality of work to the person next to them. And generally, we if we lose a match, we lack belief. So we've compared to the person in front of us. To build that, and this is, I go back to, again, we'll go right back to the start where I spoke about, I compare to myself. Am I better than what I was yesterday? Not am I better than the person at the other end, because you're going to win matches, you're going to lose matches, you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. Mm-hmm. There's a great story about the Chinese farmer. It's another one that your listeners can YouTube. Is the Chinese farmer talks about it's never good or it's bad. It just is what it is, because we don't know the consequence of good or bad. So if I play a good match where I think a good means that I've won the match, that doesn't necessarily mean I've performed the way that I needed to perform, because the next match I might come up with someone that I performed the same way and they beat me. All right, so it might mean that I've just beaten that person at the other end of the day. They might have had a bad day. So was it a good thing or a bad thing? It's just, and the Chinese farmer always says, it's just maybe, because we don't know what the consequence is of that action or that behavior. So I think it's that self-awareness piece that comes back to that. And it comes back to, how do I measure what confidence and belief actually is and where it stems from?
Yeah, good one. Good one. So if I did a thought experiment with you to say, this afternoon in your coaching session, I bring you 10 tennis players and, I think they're all elite and you've only got space to work with 3 of them and you've got a 2-hour coaching session to work with these 10 players to suss them all out. What are the things that you do and what are you looking for as a coach to say, right, they're my 3 out of that 10 that I want to work with?
So it's an awesome question, because I think it comes down to, and everyone has recruiting policies within, organizations, or we have recruiting in our tennis program, or we recruit for our footy program. The first thing that I look at, and it's hands down the number one thing, is the values that these people display in the first minute they walk in. Eye contact, respect, body language, the way they present themselves, their coachability as athletes, their attitude, their effort. I look at that first and I go, okay, great. These 3 players tick the box in that. Now let's look at their tennis performance. So, I have a philosophy around person, athlete, player. So if a player comes to me and they don't have the work ethic, the attitude, the effort, the work rate, the commitment, the discipline, if they don't have that first and foremost, it's very, very hard to teach them how to play, because you just won't get the message through and they won't be able to work at it hard enough to get it at the end of the day. They might be a better player right now than the person next to them, but that person next to them is actually doing all the right things to actually have a long-term success rather than short-term. So I look at that first. Then I look at athletically, are they capable of doing what I want them to do on a tennis court? So can they move? Are they strong enough? Are they fit enough? Are they, can they position on the ball? Can they read the game? And then I look at the tennis. So I go person, athlete, player is my philosophy and always has been. Because if I go the other way around and look at the player first, and if I talk about a pyramid of success, my pyramid is down the bottom is all of the characteristics of successful human beings, and everyone that's successful has a great work rate. They're committed to what they do. Their attention to detail is second to none. They have high respect for others and for themselves, have a great self-awareness. So I look at my pyramid being, supported by all those behaviors of, successful people. And then the athlete comes second, and then the third piece is a small piece of triangle at the top, and that's the tennis player. So, it comes down to my philosophy, and I always come back to that as values first, personal behaviors, and then work from there.
And once you've got that that group, how you've filtered it. How do you then structure that for different personalities, different levels of performance about where they're at and different things that motivate people? Because you've mentioned about understanding the player and what makes them tick. How do you coordinate all of that moving piece of the jigsaw puzzle?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like, there's no doubt there's not an easy answer to that. But, I talk in tennis terms, we have a program with 40 players. So I need to know my players as intimately as possible to know what makes them tick, what doesn't. You're in a footy environment where there's 40 or 50 different guys out there and you've got to be the same. And what I like to create, though, is an environment that is fun, that is based on values, and we have our values on our whiteboard on our court and in our footy environment. So everything's based on fun environment, making sure that people want to come to our environment. Like, I want to be approachable. I want to be, there for you. I want to know that everyone cares about you when you walk into our environment. And you know what? We create this. Now, is that for everyone? No, it's not. But what you create is you create what people want. And that's that care, that love, that connection to something. And they enjoy coming to work every day, or they enjoy coming to training every day. Because when people enjoy doing something, they're not going to want to leave, right? And you're going to attract the right people to your organization if that's the environment you create.
It may be bold of me to suggest that you're in a position of privilege in a way because of where you're at as a coach, of working at that elite level of sport, that you're often getting people coming to you because they want to work with you, because they want to improve, because they want to reach, the pinnacle of their sport, whether that be footy or tennis.
Yeah. And
as a coach developer, you're working with other sports as well. But so I'm wondering about that leader is going, look, I love this and I want to do it. But, Bob and accounts and, and Betty, they're doing my head in. They don't want to be here and they're just rocking up 9 to 5. So I'm thinking, what advice can we give that person to go, what might be a starting point for them, and how do they create that environment with people who are a little bit more recalcitrant to be at work?
Yeah, and we have that all the time too. So whether it's an employee of ours or whether it's a player, we have it everywhere. And I think, you won't stop that happening. But I think one of the things that can help you understand what people are going through is understand the person behind the worker. I think that is the critical part of anything. I need to understand the person behind the player. And if I'm a leader in a business, I need to understand the person behind the worker, because, we have family issues that go on, fights at home with our loved ones. We have financial issues. We have, health issues. We have mental health issues. We have a lot of things going on. And, I like to, understand my people to be able to help them in the best way possible. And I also like to be approachable. So once you set an environment for a group, I think it's important then as a leader to be individual in your feedback rather than being always group fed feedback. I think that's a really important one. So we will set the parameters around our group stuff and say, okay, here's the environment, here's the standards that we accept and here's the ones that we don't. We can have all that set out and have it all laid out. But there's that one person in accounts that is, not pulling their weight. Okay, well, let's have a one-on-one chat. Always praise in public, but criticize or give feedback that is harsh in private, and never do that in front of others, because that makes them feel obviously, really small. So, we always have that with our coaches, is praise as loud as you can to the people that are doing the right behavior. So then you can hopefully get everybody around to hear that they've got praise because they've worked hard, or because they've chased that one ball that they didn't think they'd get, or because they gave themselves a pump up for something. And then if you want that replicated, praise it.
Yeah. And I love that, you're talking about caring and connection, because I think they're grossly underrated leadership skills that if you do can just help with 80% of the issues that leaders find frustrating or difficult. That ability to just, hey, what's going on first, as opposed to what the hell are you doing first, I think is a really great philosophy that we sometimes forget under that pressure and frustration and performance orientation that we sometimes have.
Yeah, well, no, we do. And look, actually, to go on that, and someone that is a mentor of mine is Craig McRae, and Craig's done an amazing job with the Collingwood Footy Club in the last 2 years. And when he got hired, it was actually interesting. I sent him a message, and about 6 months before that, when the job came up, and I said, "This is a great job for you." We had a conversation around that, but he's just such a caring person for the people. He gets success because people want to run through a wall for him. And as an assistant coach in his environment, I would do anything for that guy because he made me feel valued and he made me feel like I was cared and wanted in his environment. And I think it's, a great example of a leader that just makes you feel like you're 10 feet tall. He's a great example of that, and then one that probably led me to that care and connection piece.
Terrific. And a great mentor for you to have.
Incredible. Couldn't ask for a better one, to be honest.
I'm interested in the way that you, if you have one, I'm sure you do, around structures in the way that you deliver messages to make sure that, feedback sticks or instruction sticks.
I guess this one here is one that I've learned only over the last few years, but there's a thing called the forgetting curve, and Ebbinghaus is the designer behind this. But if you look at the forgetting curve of when you teach something and how quickly it takes to forget it, it's something like 6 days. And in 6 days, if you teach something one day, 6 days later, you've totally forgotten it. We have to continue to revisit the learnings. So, everyone talks about learning styles, and there's an element of people learn different ways, but I think you have to encompass all the different learning styles in your explanations of, visual, auditory, and make sure that you show, a lot of different examples and demonstrate and kinesthetically do things. But over the course of my teachings with athletes, what I try and do is I always start the session that I have the next day with what we focused on the day before. It's a reflection piece. Or if it's 2 days later, it's, okay, what did we do last time? Reflect upon it, write it down. Okay, now let's start our session now. And then we finish the session and we reflect upon it. So you're always reflecting upon it. When you've got people that you might not see regularly, you might see one person, you might be a mentor to somebody, or, you're a leader who's in different places all the time. You might have a chat group, a WhatsApp group, or an email thread, and you might continually send through 3 or 4 of your key elements and key points so that people are always remembering it. So for me, it's about how do we teach it in the ways that, from a learning style perspective, but then how regularly do we teach it? Don't reintroduce new concepts every week if you haven't got one concept to stick. I think the best coaches in the world do the basics really well. Get your fundamentals right, get your basics right, and continually and consistently do them and layer upon the other things one by one, rather than layering everything all at once or new concepts all the time. If it hasn't stuck, you can't move. You've got to grasp the basics first.
And is there a way that you would structure sessions to help that as well, in the sense of, are you hitting balls? Are they hitting balls? Is it practice? Is it theory? Are you breaking down a particular skill to say, right, we're just using that part of the broader skill? Is it all of those things?
It's all of those things and more, really. Like, we do, different things. It could be from, okay, let's just go out there and play. So let's just go and hit some balls and allow you just to be free and instinctive and see where your instincts are lying now after we've spoken about something yesterday. And if the instincts are still not ingrained where it needs to be, now it's the teaching point. So we start to teach again. We start to break it down a little bit. We go through it slowly. Now we go back into it as an open instinctive drill and see where the instincts now lie. Okay, great. The instincts are lying where we want them to lie. Perfect. We can now move forward. And if, I always speak to athletes about the brain, and the brain accesses 95% of it in a match is subconscious. So if 95% of your thinking is subconscious in under pressure and 5% is conscious, you don't want your conscious brain thinking about what it should already be ingrained in the subconscious brain. You want that to allow it to understand what's happening, the trend of the game. You want it to understand different things. So on game day, we've got to allow instincts to take over. If I haven't done the work with my player to set them up for success, on game day, their conscious brain is thinking about what I taught them during the week. I want their conscious brain free of that. I want their subconscious brain full to the cup, and I want their conscious brain to say, hey, what's happening in this match? I need to stay calm here. Okay, I'm feeling this is happening. Okay, here's the tool that Marc gave me to work on that. So it's kind of a bit freer. So I think that's the important part of learning, is to fill the subconscious brain during the week and then allow game day or the pressure situations to be instinctive.
A lot of what I hear you saying is about finding solutions to those problems every single day. So as you say, you've got tools in this toolkit, and how are you deploying them? And are you deploying them in the right way to help you progress through that as quickly as you can? So it's sort of this this game, if you like, of life, of going, okay, things I'm unhappy, or it's not the way it is, or I'm feeling stressed, how do I feel calm? Or I'm feeling tense, how do I feel relaxed? Is that sort of breaking it down to its most simple form, or am I
100%
doing a disservice to both of us in the work that we do?
100%, because at the end of the day, like, you know, I always say that I teach life lessons through tennis lessons. So, you know, I create problems and I say to the player, go and solve them. And then when they're struggling to find those solutions, I try and lead them in the direction without giving them the answer, and then lead them to what tool might be needed in that situation. And then they start to use it and go, oh, wow. So when that problem arises, I use that. So then when they get to life, they go, great, here's a problem. Here's a solution. You know, because we have so many people in society these days with mental health issues, and, you know, and I coach a lot of players with it, and I've been through it myself. And if you set people up to say, for every problem, there's a solution, we're giving them access to say, hey, in every problem in life, it's okay. You'll be fine. There's always a solution to that. It's just a matter of finding what solution you need at that time. So, you know, it's always teaching that life lesson through that sporting lesson, I call it, or tennis lesson for me. And you're right, like it's, you know, take them to Bunnings, and look, I'm no handyman, and my wife will tell you I'm the most unhandy handyman in the world. But, you know, I take my players to Bunnings, fill their toolkit up and say, okay, whatever problem we have, we've got a tool for it, and here's how we're going to use it.
And that's a valuable coach, isn't it? It's a valuable leader. It's a valuable parent. Tell me, do you use these skills? Are they in personal life? Do you do it with your wife and kids, and how you're dealing with other people in the supermarket or on the roads and all those sort of different contexts?
I use it everywhere. It's a way of being for me now. You know, I think when you do something often enough, it becomes your habit, it becomes who you are, and you create your own identity by how you deal with things, right? So, you know, I coach, you know, pro athletes, and been fortunate enough to work with 4 world number ones and work with a team that's won 3 premierships, and, you know, have these messages work, you know, in a sporting context. And I get home and I'm trying to, you know, give my kids the same advice. And they're like, Dad, what do you know? And I'm like, okay, well, cool. That's fine. You know, that's cool with me. So
can't be a prophet in your own kingdom.
You can't be. So, you know, and look, I want to be dad too, you know, and I want them to understand that, you know, come to me as a dad, and I'll happily give you advice if you want it. But you learn so much from so many people, and I you know, always encourage that with my kids, and it just doesn't work at home, my messaging. So I would love it too, but it just doesn't, unfortunately.
Yeah. I had a mentor once who once said to me, you know, never stop learning, because life never stops teaching. And it stuck with me and has been part of my philosophy of that curiosity around, you know, as I'm walking through just day to day, what am I noticing? What can I learn from things I'm watching or things I'm listening to or people I'm talking to? It's a lovely way of being. And, you know, in the hour we've spent together, you've given us a stack of insights and knowledge about how people can be not just good leaders and learners, but how we can grow and evolve and approach that process for our own development. Anything that you think is a finishing note for people that you might get them to think about and reflect upon, who are out there saying, I want to grow myself and evolve, or I'm responsible for other people?
Yeah, I guess the last bit I would probably say is, and I always give this advice to a lot of the assistant coaches I have, or people in coach education that I deal with, is you're a coach everywhere you go. You're a leader everywhere you walk. Whether you're at the local McDonald's and, you know, one of your athletes sees you at Macca's eating the wrong food, they will you are role modeling the behavior you want them to do. So, you know, if you turn up out of uniform, but you ask everybody to be in uniform, you're the role model. So, you know, you're actually role modeling the behavior. So you're always going to be that leader no matter where you are in society, no matter if you're on duty or off duty. I think, you know, I have a duty of care in particular around my athletes to say that, you know, I'm willing to walk the walk if I'm willing to talk the talk. So I will be, you know, the person I need to be in society, and I'll show you the values that we have on our whiteboard every day, no matter where I am. And, you know, if I'm expecting you to do it, then I'm going to do the same thing. So if that's my parting message to anyone listening to this, is, you know, be the leader everywhere you go, not just in your environment.
What a great place to wrap up. Before we do finish off, where can people find you if they want to find out more, connect with you? Yeah,
they can find me at just Marc Sophoulis, my name, on LinkedIn, or social media. It's just my name, so full name and everything. And then if you want to look at some of our coaching stuff and the things I do online, the tennis menu is where you can find me. And like Andrew said, well, you know, we do online coaching from tennis to, life and mentoring in different avenues. It's funny, I mentor a Latin dancer who was a world champion. I mentor a singer-songwriter who's just released her first album, tennis players, footy players, coaches. So, the lessons that we have in sport transfer to any part of life.
Yeah, awesome. And look, you've given people so many different strategies to try. I think when we listen back, it will be full of rich nuggets for people to go, no, not that one, but yes, that one, and yes, that one, and no, not that one. So you've given lots of thought provokers for people. So thank you. It's been a ripper conversation, as I knew it would be, and I really appreciate your time and insights and expertise in this space. So thanks, Mark. It's been brilliant.
Absolute pleasure, Andrew. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
A quick word before we go. Just a reminder about the new and exciting initiative, the Better Life Lab. If you want to be first and part of the exclusive launch, go to andrewhorsfield.com/Better Life Lab. Thanks for listening.